So yes, as I said, welcome everyone. Today we're going to be talking about resume writing, and I'm going to give you some very practical tips and advice on the best way to develop or even refresh your current resume. Depends where you're at in your career as to how you'll take this. So I'm just going to do the presentation, and as Josephine said, feel free to type in questions which we will answer at the end, and any other questions relating to anything else I might be able to help with in terms of your job search and your career development. I don't really need to do any housekeeping because Josephine's done it. I apologise to those who were here yesterday, but I'm just going to repeat this slide explaining who we are. So the Skills and Jobs Centre exists at every TAFE in Victoria. So there's 16 major centres throughout Victoria based at different TAFEs. And it's a free service to everyone in the community. We're government funded, which means that the government pays for us to assist those people, particularly when they feel that they have barriers to study. To help them with whatever it is that they might need to be job ready. And that may be simply that you need someone to look at your resume and tell you whether or not you're on the right track, or help you with some job searching techniques. Or it may be that you need some assistance to understand the kinds of training and education that you might need to do the job that you're really keen on doing. We always say at the Skills and Jobs Centre, a job for now and a plan for later. So the job for now is all about your resume and understanding what is available, and that's what we talked about yesterday, and how to search for those jobs. But then the plan for later is also thinking about what sorts of training and education you might want to do in future to get the ultimate career that you want to do, whether it's doing a bit more study in an area you're already familiar with, or taking advantage of some of the fantastic free and very cheap opportunities for training at the moment through the free TAFE program, Job Trainer, and others. So our service is available to all of you and all of your family and friends. We help everybody, regardless of their citizenship or their visa status, anything like that. The only criteria, I guess, we sort of have is that you need to be able to work. So you need to be old enough to work. And if you're on a visa, you need to have full work rights so that we can actually assist you. If you don't, then we probably need to refer you to someone else to get all of that organised before we're actually best placed to help you. We help people one-on-one, that's individual career counselling. That's done over the phone or via Zoom at the moment, but hopefully we'll be back face-to-face at our offices in Footscray and Sunshine, and various other places where we pop up in the early new year. Training and upskilling advice, including any course selection. We may advise that you undertake some study at Vic Uni Polytechnic, but it doesn't have to be there. It may be a short course at a community centre or another RTO. Resume and job interview preparation. Obviously, we're talking about resumes today, but we do prepare people for job interviews by running mock interviews or practice interviews and preparing your answers for those. Teaching you how to search for work, and then where needed we might refer you to other providers for other services that they're more expert in. It might be welfare, legal advice, any of those sorts of things. So that's us, and at the end of this presentation you'll see our website address. You can access that for more information about all of the things that we do. On our website is a free resume template. You're welcome to download this and use it to help you develop your resume if you're starting from scratch. But really what it's useful for is to give you all the different sections of your resume that relate to what I'm going to be talking about today. So your career objective, your skills, your previous experience, your education and qualifications. And it's really just a brainstorming sheet for you to get all that information down and work out how you might develop a resume. I advise you, if you haven't developed a resume at all, that you download and even print this resume template and just use it as a brainstorming sheet as you go back through your history and your work experience to think about how you might develop your own resume. Oh God, I forgot about this slide. This is a still shot of me. On our website, there's also a very short video. It's about 10 or 12 minutes long, in a series of 3 videos. And this one is called Resume Refresh. So it's actually the same sorts of information I'm giving you today, but in a shorter format. So if you feel that you wanted to revisit this in your own time, this is another way you can do that. And you just head to our website and you'll find this video in various places on it. So following this presentation as well, the fact sheet that relates to it is also available on our website. It's fact sheet number 2, Refresh Your Resume. And the main points that I cover today are highlighted on this fact sheet. It just gives you a few tips that will give you that extra edge when it comes to your resume. Okay, so let's talk about resumes. It's obviously something that we deal with a lot. My team often laugh that we dream about resumes. We do them so often, and we're very good at it in terms of understanding what it is that employers want and how your resume should look and sound, I guess, for an employer to be attracted to it. As I said yesterday, the job market is more competitive than ever these days. And therefore, your resume needs to be spot on for you to have an opportunity to get the job that you want. So the first question we're often asked about is do I need a resume or do I need a CV? So I want to clear this up a little bit. CV is short for curriculum vitae, and for those of us who are a bit older, we used to always refer to our resume as our curriculum vitae, but really a CV is more of an academic document and it's longer. So imagine that you're a researcher and you've got a whole lot of papers that you've published and other information that you want to include in your work history. That's when you would develop a CV. For most of us, we just call it a resume. You don't have to write on the top of it resume. You don't have to refer to it on the resume document, but just for the sake of clarity, I talk about resumes, and that's what everybody needs to apply for work. So an effective resume would present who you are, what you have to offer, and how you're going to add value to an organisation. So that's why it's really important to tailor your resume, because the way you might add value to one organisation may be different than the way you're going to add value to a different organisation, maybe even for a different job. So that's why we talk, and we are just going to say it over and over, that you need to tailor your resume. You need to make it suit each and every job that you go for. It summarises your education, your skills, your employment history, and within that, any responsibilities and achievements that you've had throughout your employment history. So that's the basic notion of a resume. And what I encourage people to do is to create what I call a master resume, and then you can cut and paste or copy and paste that into a new document to tailor it a little bit for any specific job that you're going for. And that'll become clearer as we go through. Who needs a resume? Everyone who is seeking employment should develop a resume, and you don't need to have been in paid work to put one together. So I was doing one yesterday actually for a 16-year-old who's looking for their first part-time or casual job, and they don't have any work experience. They don't have any paid employment that they can refer to. But you could still add details if that's you. So things about your skills, your abilities, your achievements, or your personal qualities. So if that's you and you don't have a lot of experience in the workforce, don't think that a resume doesn't apply to you, because it does. It's something we can develop depending on and determined by your own experiences. If it's your first job search and you don't have any work experience, then you can think about other things you might have done, like sporting activities, the hobbies that you've got, family responsibilities, achievements at school if you're still young and at school or you're still studying, or any other community involvement with your church, volunteering, things like that. So don't think it doesn't apply to you. Another point I would make about this, I was also dealing with a man the other week who was retrenched from his job, and he wanted to get exactly the same sort of job in a new company. So he said, I shouldn't need a resume because I'm just doing the same thing. That's not the case, because with online job searching, for example, they're always asking for your resume. So you're going to need to write that stuff down. And developing a resume in the way that I show you is a really great way to write it down in a format that's suitable for any job that you go for. So 2 questions that we are asked again all the time. What should my resume look like? And what is the ideal length? This is a big question and something I want to make a really strong point about. So looking at this screen, I don't expect you to be able to read the words on it. I just want you to look at the format here. There's a couple of things I want you to note. Firstly, your resume should not be any longer than 2 pages or 1 page double-sided. So if you've got a long work history, you're going to need to think about how you're going to cut that down or consolidate that into a much smaller document. And I'll give you some tips on that down the track. It should be in a very simple format, and I cannot emphasize that enough. These days, employers use automatic tracking software, which means that a computer will often be looking at your resume and searching for keywords, the same words in your resume as appear in the job ad that they've just put out. So you need to make sure that your resume is not heavily formatted. So a lot of people go online and find pretty nice fancy templates, but they're no use to you if they're too complex, because the automatic tracking software will not be able to read them. And that includes things like special fonts, photos, those sorts of things. They're very distracting to the software, and it means that it'll just be overlooked. Your resume may not even get looked at. So this is an example of a resume just developed in a Word document, just with some highlighted sections and some dot points. Not many columns, not much formatting. It's simple, it's straightforward, and it's an example of the sort of thing that you could develop just by using Word yourself. Or there are some other templates, and I'll show you a couple at the end that might be useful to you. But in terms of the sections, and this is what we're going to be going through today, obviously you need to have your contact details, and I'll go through in each section what you need to include in that area. A career objective, or it could be sometimes called a professional summary or a personal profile. Basically, this is the section that can be most easily and readily tailored to suit any job that you're going for. So if we think about the words career objective, an objective is what you're after, it's what you want. So your career objective needs to speak to what it is you want, what you're looking for, what you're after. And again, I'll go through that in detail. The skills section, I've put this as demonstrated skills and abilities, just meaning that's the things that have been demonstrated in work experience in the past. The skills section is the section that employers say every time that their eyes go to immediately, because they want to know that the people that they're employing have a variety of skills, not just the technical skills that are required to do the job. So let's just say hairdressing, for example. There's an assumption that if you're applying for the job, you know how to be a hairdresser, you're qualified, and you've got the experience that they've asked for. So those technical skills are important, but they're looking for some other things. Are you a good communicator? Do you have customer service experience? Have you used technology? Do you speak other languages? Are you interested in professional development? Those sorts of things are the kinds of skills that you need to add to your resume. The employment history is the section people are probably most familiar with, and that's just going back through your work history from the most recent job you've had all the way back to where you started, unless of course it goes back more than about 15 years, in which case you're going to need to be selective. I've got a work history of, I don't even know now, over 20 years anyway, probably 25 years of work experience. I'm not going to go back to my very first part-time job. I'm going to think about the job that I'm applying for and which of the jobs I've had in the past that I want to highlight and talk about in my work history. Education and training is an important section. So obviously, you're going to list any TAFE or university qualifications you have. But on top of that, it may be other things like that you've got a driver's license and a reliable vehicle, or a forklift license, or a first aid certificate, or a working with children check. Those sorts of things can come under this education, qualifications, certifications. You don't necessarily need to put that you've finished school if it's been a while since you finished school, because that's pretty obvious. It just depends on your own experience. And then the section on references, which I'll talk about a little later. So that's a vague sort of general idea of what your resume should look like and the sections. Just a note that the education and training I've put at the end. So we tend to do that because once again, there's an assumption on the part of the employer that you have the education and training that they've asked for. So you don't need to put that up front on the first page. The first page is super important because that's obviously where the employer is going to have their attention grabbed initially. So we put the education and training towards the end, unless you use a slightly different template, which I'll show you an example a little later. Okay, so what should I include in my resume? What you write in your resume depends on the job you're applying for. So once again, I'm a broken record, but you need to tailor your resume to include information that clearly shows you have the skills the employer is looking for. That's really important. So going through the job ad and seeing what skills they're asking for, the words that they use, and then going back to your resume and thinking, have I included those same sorts of words? Because that's going to matter when it comes to getting your resume looked at. So the first area, as I mentioned, is the contact information. So this goes at the very top of your document in the header. Include your given name and surname, your address. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be your street address. You could just put your suburb and your postcode. Again, the tracking software might find you through that. Your phone number and your email address, but a couple of points about that. Firstly, please make sure that if you include a phone number and an email address, that they're actually emails and a phone number that you attend to, not your brother's mobile number, because if that's the way the employer chooses to get in contact with you, they're going to want you to answer the phone. If your email address is difficult to understand or read or remember, then you need to think hard about whether you might change it. I have some very funny examples of, young people who created an email address when they were in primary school, Fuzzy Wuzzy Bear 29, that doesn't really sound appropriate for a job application. So maybe have a think about that. Or if your email address is all numbers, then that might be hard to remember and easy to mistype. So words are easier to remember. Perhaps your name, but have a think about your email address and whether or not that needs to be changed. Similarly, if you're going for a professional sort of role, you might have a LinkedIn profile. That's common for people who work in office administration, IT, a range of different jobs, not every job, but certainly some professional jobs. But again, you need to make sure that if you include your LinkedIn profile in your contact information, that you actually attend to that LinkedIn profile. Because if that's the way the employer chooses to reach out to you, you're going to miss it if you don't look at your LinkedIn profile. Just one other note about other things you could include. I did have a client recently who is a florist, and she had an Instagram account which had a lot of photos of the work that she'd done in the past. I had the same thing with a hairdresser as well. So it was a way to have her portfolio available so that people could look at it when they were looking at her job application. That may or may not relate to you if you do particular work that needs to be displayed in some sort of profile. That might be another thing to include, but you do need to attend to those. A note here, just note how simple the contact information is. You do not need to include personal information like your date of birth, your religion, your gender, or your marital status, or even a photo. Those things are not necessary for a job application. Down the line, when it comes to job interviews, or if you're asked directly by the employer, that may become relevant, but on your resume, it's not relevant to include that sort of information. It's not a dossier on you. It's not a judgment on you. It's really just how can we contact you. The career objectives section is probably the hardest one for most people to create, but it's also, I guess, the best place and the first place for you to highlight what it is that you can do for an organisation. If you're starting out, you might want to include a career objective. If you've got a lot of experience and you're moving into the same sort of role, you might call that a professional summary or a work summary. It depends. The title doesn't really matter. But regardless of what you call it, it's really trying to tell the employer what position you're looking for, what level of responsibility you want, and where you see yourself in the future. So let's look at some specific examples. Employers prefer a carefully worded and very specific career objective. So I've put 3 here, and I'm just going to make a little point about these. These are very, very simple. Yours might be a bit more detailed than this. But the first one says, to gain experience in all aspects of hair care and salon management, enabling me to become an asset to your business. So this implies to me, to gain experience implies to me that this is someone just starting out. They want to gain experience. They want to get experience in hair care and salon management. So they're new. The second one says, to broaden my business knowledge and experience with the ultimate aim of working as a commercial consultant for non-profit organisations. So to broaden my business knowledge implies you've already got some and you want to get more. With the ultimate aim of working as, and they've been very specific about the sort of job that they would like to go for in the future. And the last one, to gain more experience and knowledge in the field of electronics and warehousing, where I can use my skills to improve your company's productivity and reputation. So once again, this implies that someone has already got some experience and knowledge in the field of electronics and warehousing, and they probably have some other skills that can improve this company's productivity. So this is an example. These are each examples of how your career objective can say certain things about you. You need to think about what you want to say about yourself, and certainly that's something that we at the Skills and Jobs Centre can help you with in terms of coming up with the right sort of career objective. And once again, there's some examples on our website. Okay, the next section after your career objectives is the skills and strengths section. So sometimes your work history doesn't necessarily demonstrate that you can do a particular job, especially if you've just left school or you've been away for an extended period. So you can overcome this by having a section in your resume that describes the things you can do that relate to the job or the industry you're applying for. And these are what we call transferable or employability skills. So to give you an example, if you've been out of work for a while, you've been at home raising children, and you haven't worked for 5 years, and you're going for a job in office administration, You might talk about the skills that you've got. I mean, as a parent raising children, you're obviously highly organized, you know how to mediate, you know how to problem solve and manage your time. You can talk about those skills in relation to this office administration job, you know, highlighting how organized you are, how involved you can become. So just think again about the skills and strengths you have that are transferable and could work for any job that you might go for. So your transferable skills include things like your practical or hands-on skills, so your ability to do something specifically. And then more generally, are you really good at using social media or computers in general? Do you have good leadership skills because you were the captain of your footy team, or you've been the, I don't know, one of the administrators on your child's school council? Do you have strong people skills that you've demonstrated through previous work, maybe completely different work, but you had to talk to a lot of people in that job and it relates to the job you're going for? Communication and on and on. I mentioned these yesterday, but the 8 key employability skills, and we will be looking at this in a separate workshop tomorrow, are the ones we list here: communication, teamwork, problem solving, initiative and enterprise, which just means coming up with ideas and thinking of new things, planning and organizing, self-management, so looking after yourself, being responsible for yourself within the workplace, not waiting around to be told what to do, learning, so previous learning and a willingness to continue learning, and technology, the ability to use technology in your work. Do you have these skills? This is something you need to think about when you're developing your resume. If you need help to come up with the different skills you might include in your section on skills in your resume, there is a tick sheet on our website called Employability Skills, and you can download this or even have a look at it and have a think about which of the skills that you have that may or may not be things that you could include in your resume. I can see that someone's raised their hand. Is there a question? You can feel free to unmute and ask me. No? Okay, I'll keep going then. Perhaps if you've got a question. Oh, hello. Hello, do you have a question?
No.
No? Okay, we'll wait till the end then perhaps for questions. If you do have questions, I'll just leave that till the end. Okay, so after your skills section comes your employment history. And once again, this is something people are very familiar with. Just remember, it can include any paid work or volunteer positions that you've had, including things like work placements if you've done them during your study, or work trials or anything like that. But for each role that you include, even if it's a volunteer role or something like that, remember to include your job title, the company name, so the name of the company or organisation you worked for, and the location, so the suburb, the state, even the country if it was overseas. The dates you worked there, so using years and months. So it might be like I worked from January 2017 to September 2018 in this job. And a tip is to use bullet points, so simple points, with short, clear sentences so that readers, being your employer or the computer software, can pick up any information that you want to include quickly. And it's these bullet points that might change slightly depending on the job that you're going for. If you need to include different words than you might have originally included in your master resume. So these are the things, the ticks come with each of those sections. Those are the 3 things that you need to remember to include for each job that you've had. If you can't think of how to describe what you did, one tip is to add detail to your descriptions by asking yourself who, what, why, where, when, and how, etc. So as an example, if you've been a childcare worker, you might ask yourself, how many children did I look after? How old were they? what activities were involved in caring for them. So once you've written that you had this childcare job and you want to list in your bullet points the activities or the responsibilities or the tasks that you undertook, you might have simple dot points like these. Assisted childcare workers in the room for 20 children aged 18 months to 3 years. Supervised playtime, snacks and meal times, outdoor activities and nap time. Kept records on individual children, recorded observations and information about activities, meals served. I can't even see my own screen there, but you can see that last dot point. So basically you want to keep it simple and concise and relevant to the job that you're going for. If, for example, you've been a childcare worker, but you're not going for a childcare job, you're going for a different job in office administration, for example, then you'd want to think about how might I describe my activities and my tasks slightly differently. So you may want to talk about organisation, communication. Just a note to anyone who's got their microphone on, maybe mute it for the moment if you can, and then you can unmute it at the end. Thanks. Okay, when it comes to describing your previous experience, one thing that you could also do is to describe any achievements, accomplishments, results or awards that demonstrate how well you did in your job, if that's relevant. So it could be something measurable, like the dollars that you saved or earned, or the time that you saved, or customer satisfaction was increased, or productivity was increased. So if there's something that you wanted to sort of brag about, if you like, on your resume, as an example of how well you can do a job, then that's to be encouraged and would be included within that list, that bullet list you include after the job. So for the childcare role that I included before, it says introduce story reading time before the afternoon nap. Colleagues provided positive feedback, noting the children were more relaxed, making it much easier to settle them into their beds. So that demonstrates that you've used initiative because you've done something different than what was done before, and that your colleagues provided positive feedback, meaning that the people you worked with as a team thought that you'd done a great job. And obviously then the children responding to that is kind of the equivalent of customer satisfaction. It worked. So that's an achievement. Have a think about your own achievements. Have there been some that you would like to talk about? And finally, the other section that you need to include is education and qualifications. If you don't have any formal education and qualifications, you might include this section and call it, certifications or licenses or something like that. But it's basically any, I guess, certificates or anything that you have that might be relevant to the job that you're going for. So it could be obviously university degrees, even from overseas, and certificates from TAFE, but it could also be things like short training courses. Maybe you did a barista course and learned how to make coffee. Maybe you did a responsible service of alcohol. Maybe you did a first aid course. Workshops that you've undertaken. So even not perhaps this one right now, but things like this, where you've gone to a particular workshop and learnt a particular skill. Licenses, obviously your driver's license, forklift license, a white card if you want to go into construction, and any other forms of accreditation that you might have. Also, workplace training, that sort of thing. So if you did a number of occupational health and safety workshops or training at your previous employment, then you should be including those, because that's a demonstration not only of the skills that you've got, but your willingness to learn and be involved in any training. Just a note, and I made this point before, if you're still at school or you've left school in the last couple of years, then definitely you can talk about your schooling, so that you completed VCE, and even some highlights of your experience completing VCE or VCAL or whatever you might have done. But if it's a little bit beyond that and you've already then gone on to tertiary study and completed something, then it's probably not necessary for you to include your details about school. You don't need to list your grades or your results of your transcript. You may be asked to provide a transcript later once you get to the interview or employment stage, but you would list those if they were a real achievement. If you did really well and you wanted to sort of talk about that as a demonstration of something you've achieved, then by all means you could include that. So references is a separate thing that I wanted to talk about. When we talk about references, what we're saying is that you need to have 2 to 3 people who you can ask to talk about you to a potential employer about the kind of worker you are or might be based on what they know about you. So even if you haven't had any work experience before, you could still ask someone like a teacher, someone you volunteer with or work at your church with or something like that, a sports coach or the captain of a team that you've played in, your manager during work experience or structured workplace learning if you went to TAFE, or even your supervisor at work at your part-time job. So I made this point at yesterday's workshop. Your referees need to be people that can talk about the kind of worker you might be, that you would be punctual, reliable, that you're good with people, that you can complete a task, that you can follow instructions, all those sorts of things. Not just that you're a nice person. It needs to be someone you've worked with before. Now, some people struggle with this, particularly if they're new to the workforce or new to the country. I've got some ideas about that, but one of the things I would suggest is even doing a weekend of volunteering is an opportunity to make connections and find some people who would be referees for you because you're working with them. So therefore they'd be able to say those things about you. Once you know who your referees are going to be, it's important when you're doing your resume that you need to ask their permission to pass on their details. Now, you don't have to list their details on the resume, and there's a couple of reasons for this. Firstly, not everyone wants their details circulated. If you're applying for a whole lot of jobs and you're putting the names and contact details of your referees on your resume every time, that referee might end up on a mailing list, and that's annoying, and that isn't something that people like. The other reason is that it gives you more room on your resume. If you just put a note under the title references that contact details for referees are available on request, then you don't need to provide any details until you're asked by the employer. And that might be when you go for a job interview, or it might be after a job interview. But you don't need to provide those details on your resume. It is important, though, that you have those details maybe in a separate document and ready and available. The other reason that I suggest, for example, for myself, I probably have, 8 different referees that I might ask to be my referee, but it depends which job I'm going for. So I'm a career advisor, so if I was going for that sort of job, I'd have specific people that I might ask. But I'm also a secondary teacher, so I might have different people to ask around that sort of work, and on with my work experience. So whoever your referees are, just create a new document and make sure you've got all their details correct. Their name, their title at work, the company they work for or that you worked with them, their mobile number or their work phone number so they can be contacted, an email address, and sometimes it can be useful just to write a very brief statement about how they know you, so that when you're asked, who's this referee, you can easily and quickly remember what it is that you did with them and how you worked with them. Once you get to the stage of actually sending your resume out and getting to a job interview where you may be asked for references, then make sure your referees, the 2 or 3 people that you've asked to be your referees, are fully aware of what job you're going for. So you can just email them a link to the job description or advertisement, because then they know what to talk about. If it's a specific sort of job, they know then that they can talk about the skills that you have that relate to that job. And obviously a copy of your resume so that they can refer to your achievements or your skills. They might not know your whole history, so it can be useful to send them your resume once you've finished it. The question that we're often asked is about, should I include my personal interests or hobbies? And this is a very individual answer. So listing your interests and hobbies can help an employer form a picture of you, because hobbies or community activities can demonstrate your initiative, creativity, communication skills, or organisational ability. And this is especially important if the skills are relevant to the jobs you're applying for. So if I go back to the childcare example, if I'm applying for a childcare job and I'm really artistic, I love painting and I love doing artwork in my own time, or I'm a really good cook, those things might be the thing that gets me over the line in that job. But if I'm going for a job in a warehouse, is it important for my boss to know that I'm really interested in cooking and I'm really artistic? That's a question for you to think about. So ask yourself, what am I trying to tell this employer by including this information? And what does this activity reveal about me and my strengths or my values? So if you love long walks on the beach, that's great, but does it tell your employer something? Does it indicate that you like to keep fit, that you like being outdoors, that you like spending time with family? I'm not sure, but have a think about whether or not you should include it. Young people who are still at school often include their personal interests because it shows that they've actually got something that they're interested in. They're not working, they're at school. So it can demonstrate that they're actually a bit of a go-getter and that they've got some interests in their life. But just have a think about whether or not you should include that. It's not something that I include on my resume necessarily, but it can be a good talking point. If you're really into knitting, then maybe you want to include that because you want that to be discussed down the line in a job interview, because it might be something that demonstrates how creative you are, and that's important. All right, so just to recap, and this is on the fact sheet that you can download from our website. Remember to include on your resume your name and contact details, your career objective, a comprehensive list of your skills, your employment history, including concise descriptions of the main tasks or responsibilities you undertook in each role, your education and/or any other relevant qualifications, and a statement that references will be made available on request. So if you do all of these sections, then your resume is complete. Just have a little look at a couple of other formats here. So this is again, you're not expected to read the words on this, but this is a format that's just a Word document. So when you go on to Word and you look at opening a new document, you can open a template that's called resume, and it's very simple. This one here is very simply formatted. It just has the contact details at the top. It's very like the first one I showed you, a short career objective, a skills section, an experience section, and then education and references. This template here is available on Seek, and it's also a very simple template, but it's in a more formatted kind of, I guess it's in a highly formatted sort of template, which means it's got a few more columns. The reason I include this one is that you'll notice that you can fit a lot of information into this document because of the columns. So on this one, the key skills are highlighted on the left-hand side of the first page, as is the education and training and the personal summary. This was for a young person, so they didn't have a career objective. They were just looking for a part-time job. So they called this bit personal summary. And then work experience, that's all on the first page. And then the second page is just devoted to their achievements, their personal interests. And in this case, they included their current availability because they were looking for a casual job after school. So a simple template like this one, which is on Seek, can be easily downloaded and easily used. and then you can change it and tailor it to suit any job that you're going for. My own resume follows a similar format to this because there's a lot of work history. So it gives me the opportunity to really squish that into a much smaller space without it looking too crowded. If you want any more information on the workshops that we run, or you want to organise a one-on-one appointment, please feel free to email us directly or to visit our website, and the website address is listed there once again. Just a reminder, on that website is the fact sheet that relates to today's resume writing workshop. There's also the short video called Refresh Your Resume, which covers very similar topics to what I've talked about today if you want to be reminded. There's the resume template and the employability skills tick sheet. All of those things and more can be found on this website, as well as there being a button you can click on that says need assistance and email us for any extra assistance. If you've already got a resume and you just want us to have a look at it and see whether or not it's suited to the sort of job you want to go for, then you can always just email us directly at sjc@vu.edu.au, and you can send us your current resume and we can either reformat it for you, we can give you advice on it, we can arrange to meet with you one-on-one to talk about it, we can help you with your resume specifically if that's what you need.